We also, when we took over, when we were started discussing the question of a policy, the question of education, regulatory system in higher education was one of the things that many people flagged as something which we should not only discuss, but review thoroughly. We understood that the regulatory system needs a complete overhaul because of the way in which it has been functioning, and certain things were not anticipated, but then it happens. That is kind of a thing. And the overhauling in order to we are energizing higher education sector itself. We have said how to restructure universities, how to bring in research, how do you to create liberal education. So there is a whole host of things that's going to happen. So if you don't have the right regulatory system to facilitate this kind of a growth of new areas and new transformatory system, then obviously we will be left with difficulties in seeing the right type of achievement that we are looking for. So in order to see how to correct this, the regulatory system of higher education will ensure that the distinct, what we decided that the distinct function, everybody knows what it is, so I'm not going to go into the details of it, but distinct functions of regulation, accreditation, funding, and academic standard setting will be performed by distinct, independent, empowered bodies. And it is expected to create checks and balances in the system, minimize conflicts of interest. This is one of the critical things that was agitating our mind. We have to minimize the conflict of interest and eliminate concentrations of power. The four institutional structures will work independently and yet at the same time in synergy towards common goals. These four structures will be set up as four independent verticals within one umbrella institution, the Higher Educational Commission of India, HECI. The first vertical of HECI will be the National Higher Education Regulatory Council, with the NHERC. It will function as a single point regulator for the higher education sector, but as of now, excluding medical and legal education. It will be set up to regulate in a light but tight manner, focusing on few matters like financial probity, good governance, and full online and offline self-disclosure of finances, audits, this kind of things but they are all light but tight. That is the definition is elaborated. The second vertical of HECA will be a meta-accrediting body, the National Accreditation Council, will be a primary mechanism for regulation through accreditation. That is the relationship between regulation and accreditation. The third vertical of HECA will be the Higher Education Grants Council, responsible something like the present UGC, but much more enhanced in terms of the powers for granting, and responsible funding and financing of higher education based on transparent criteria. HEGSC will be responsible for disbursement of scholarship, development funds, launching new focus areas. All those kind of things will be under this HEGSC. The fourth vertical will be the General Education Council, the GEC, which will frame expected learning outcomes for higher education program, also referred to as graduate attributes. A National Higher Education Qualification Framework, NHEFQ, will be formulated by the GEC, the General Education Council, and will be in sync with the National Skills Qualification Framework. We talked about it in the early part of the program, the NSQF, to ease the integration of the vocational education into higher education. The professional councils like ICAR, Veterinary Council of India, National Council of Teachers Association Education, Council of Architecture, National Council of Vocational Education and Training will act as professional standard setting bodies, PSSBs, which will play a key role in the higher education system and will be invited to be the members of the General Education Council. Coming to effective governance and leadership, the policy recognizes that effective governance and leadership is the key for the creation. I want to say before that, HECI is certainly an important transformatory change that the policy is considering. And the policy has played out and government is considering. Coming to effective governance and leadership, the policy recognizes that effective governance and leadership is the key for creation of a culture of excellence and innovation in HEIs. In the next 15 years, through a system of graded accreditation and graded autonomy, all HEIs will aim to become independent, self-governing institution pursuing excellence. There are many institutions in this country which have this arrangement, but many of them are not. So that is where we are in this recommendation. With appropriate graded accreditations, such as institution will establish a board of governors consisting of highly qualified and competent individuals. These are all models which are already here. The board of governors will be empowered to govern the institution free of any external interferences, make all appointments, only there is the head of the institution, take all decisions regarding governance and so on. So there's a high level of autonomy with respect to administrative, financial, and academic. It is envisaged that they will be incentivized and supported and mentored during the process of the institution and will have such an empowered BOG. The most important thing we want to say is an empowered BOG by 2035. Most of the higher education will make the major transition. And it will develop, and the other important thing is because we need also a method of making sure that it is going according to a certain plan and goals. So BOG will develop a strategic institutional development plan, IDP as you call it, long term 10 to 15 years, medium term 5 years, and short term 1 to 3 years, based on which institution can develop educational research outcomes, parameters for quality and capacity, improve organizational, financial, and human resources development plan to assess the progress. So that is the kind of a thing that we are enjoy the thing. So we think the regulatory structure, the institutional modification will create the governance of higher educational institutions, and the overall system of the HECI concepts and the National Higher Education Curricular Framework together will bring in the necessary discipline into the functioning of the system without causing any kind of the conflict of interest, which could vitiate the atmosphere regarding the management of the higher education system. We have taken educate prayer by this kind of a recommendation, and government is very serious about how best to put it on the, because these are all at the highest level you make those changes. So you need to do quite a lot of thinking about every aspect of what is implication. So it's rightly going at the speed in which it can go, but I am sure it will be a transformatory step that the government will undertake. Thank you.
Indeed, in just 2 years' time,